Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Well, welcome once again to Kahului Hongwanji Buddhist Temple's YouTube Sunday service. Today's service is for July 11th, 2021. Today is just our regular family service. So today we will just be having a regular service, as I said, and we begin after we have already heard the Kansho, the calling bell, calling us to mindfulness, to listen to the Dharma. We will now chant the Vandana and Tisarana, praising the Buddha and the Buddha's enlightenment and taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. After that, we will chant Gassho to Amida, and then we will recite the Golden Chain of Love. Following that, I will share a Dharma message with you, and then we will chant the Metta, or the loving kindness meditation. We'll then sing the Nembutsu and have a few closing words and announcements. So thank you very much for joining us today, and please join me in Gassho as we begin our service. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to him, the exalted one, the enlightened one, the supremely awakened one. Bhutang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I go to the Sangha for guidance. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, Namanda. Namo Amida Butsu. I recite Amida's name with deep joy and gratitude. I Gassho to Amida, trees and grasses and flowers all grow in great compassion. This light shines throughout the world. I Gassho to Amida, flowers bloom and flowers fall from the
the seeds sprout new flowers. This is the truth unchanging. I Gassho to Amida. Springtime brings the happy birds, their songs all praise Amida. I join them in Nembutsu. I Gassho to Amida. When I call Amida's name, it's Amida calling me. Buddha's voice, my voice are one. I Gassho to Amida. When I'm lonely, I recite Namo Amida Butsu. Then I feel great compassion. I Gassho to Amida. Nembutsu in work and play, every day with Amida. Every moment filled with light, I Gassho to Amida. Remember the golden chain, kindness to all living things. I will follow this teaching. I Gassho to Amida. In the clear bright morning sun, in the fading light of day, in the darkness of the night, I Gassho to Amida. Namo Amida Butsu. I live in great compassion. This great power guides my life. I Gassho to Amida. Namandabu, 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 Namandabu. The virtue of Amida's vow is shared equally by all, together attaining awakened mind. We are born in the land of peace. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda, Namanda.
Golden Chain of Love. I am a link in Amida Buddha's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I must keep my link bright and strong. I will try to be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will try to think pure and beautiful thoughts, to say pure and beautiful words, and to do pure and beautiful deeds, knowing that on what I do now depends not only my happiness or unhappiness, but also that of others. May every link in Amida Buddha's golden chain of love become bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Welcome again. I'd like to share a little thoughts about the Buddhist teaching with you at this time. Today's message is a little bit of a journey into history, so it might be a little bit longer, but hopefully not too long for you. So I'd like to talk about the self-centered mind. So when I try to look at myself honestly, I'm sure you have the same experience. I have to admit that I see a lot of selfishness there. I see a kind of a self-centered person. And one thing that makes me realize this is that I generally and naturally see myself, normally my assumption is I'm a humble and modest person. I see myself as a good person until I start to think and look a little bit more deeply. And actually, though, in fairness, it's hard to tell just how humble or conceited I am, because I have no perspective of myself outside of being a self-centered person. That's sort of our problem. We're within this context of being self-centered, which, of course, there's reasons why we're self-centered in terms of our survival as a living being. But with human beings, it all becomes very complicated. But that's another talk, actually. But someone once made a satirical remark. This person said that a self-centered person is a person more interested in himself than me. And that is to say, each human being generally values himself or herself more than anyone else, and his or her own interests and needs above those of anyone else. So if you're more interested in yourself than you are in my problems or my needs, then you're selfish. But of course, I look at myself and I don't see a selfish person. Though paradoxically, of course, that's the way that my concern is always that others attend to me, but not necessarily vice versa. So we have this sort of complicated relationship with ourselves and with others. So Shakyamuni Buddha, he taught that our belief in this thing that we call ourself derives entirely from our senses. He said, what are our senses? Taste, touch, hearing, and seeing, which are part of our physical body, our physical existence. So while we live, the senses we possess are very powerful. Thus, it is immensely difficult to accept that the vital sense of oneself that we receive from our senses is not ultimately real and permanent. We get our sense of ourself from our ability to taste, touch, hear, and see, and from the feelings and thoughts which arise from these senses. And so we become completely attached to this self, this I, which our minds create or construct based on all the input that we're receiving from those senses. Buddha taught, he explained that we spend our lives making judgments designed, those are discriminating thoughts, designed to strengthen our sense of ourself, our sense of our own worth, and so on. And this creates sort of an ironic situation, because what we often judge in others, what we condemn in others, in various ways, others, the lack of humility of others, that person's conceited, that person has a big ego, and so on. That person doesn't care about other people, and so on. When we do this, we're not only judging others in comparison to ourselves, we also delude ourselves into believing that I possess the humility, the lack of self-centeredness that others possess, or that others have. So that's a little confusing, but so we delude ourselves in believing, that I have humility. I'm not self-centered, but others are. That's the meaning. So, in getting to the history part, a few years ago I saw a history program. I've read about this as well, but this history program was very vivid. And it was about the first emperor of China. And I'm always interested in the history of powerful people, how they fall into delusion based on a false understanding of their own importance. So the first emperor of China, his name was Qin Shi Huang. Actually, in his time there wasn't yet such a thing as China. So he was actually originally the ruler of the kingdom of Xin, but by means of unprecedented and unrestrained brutality, he succeeded in what he called unifying the country. So he created the Greater China what he did was he conquered and subjugated the other kingdoms all around him, the other kingdoms who hadn't yet learned how to be as brutal as he was. And having done this, he has since been hailed as the unifier of China. The human ego is always excited by great achievers, we sort of exalt them. People who are remembered for doing big things, usually big violent things. So starting an empire is considered a big thing. Actually, for a Buddhist, a country or empire is not really a big deal. It's no different than an individual self. It's just a kind of corporate self which arises due to conditions and is subject to the law of impermanence, just as we all are. Countries have no more ultimate reality than anything else, though they usually last a little longer than the individuals who populate them, although through the combined efforts of all their citizens, and especially the leaders, they tend to ultimately destroy the natural environment that created and sustained the country, and thus the country perishes through its own actions. And that almost inevitably happens to every civilization, every empire, one way or another. So unifying China was only part of Qin Shi Huang's grand scheme, getting back to him. His main purpose was actually to assure himself of his own immortality. So he built or started building the Great Wall of China. That was one thing. He really wanted to live forever. That's a good example of what the Buddha meant when he taught that attachments cause suffering. A desire to live forever is bound to cause suffering. To wish to be immortal is the ultimate attachment. I want to hold on to myself and what I have forever, right? And that definitely cannot be an unselfish wish, I don't think Qin Shi Huang would have much appreciated the teaching of impermanence, actually. He wouldn't have liked that. Even though he engaged in a lot of military activity, taking over vast territories and so on, he didn't even make a will to pass on the royal succession to one of his extremely numerous sons. He was really only concerned about himself and didn't even want to think about the possibility of dying. Next, who's going to take my place? No one. I'm going to live forever. In fact, after unifying all the separate kingdoms around him, he declared himself to be a god, actually the God, the highest God, and gods are supposed to be immortal, not immoral, maybe immoral too, but immortal. However, I suppose he couldn't avoid accepting the fact that he might one day have to die, at least temporarily. I don't know what he was thinking. As a result, one of the things he is now especially famous for was the construction of a great tomb, this great tomb which he built for himself. It was built with the slave labor of, it is said, over 700,000 people, essentially slaves, many of whom were captured in his numerous wars, all of whom had had their lives and freedom taken from them to serve in terrible pain and horrendous conditions the ego of this one man who believed he was more important than anyone else. So this famous tomb, you've probably heard about it or seen pictures of it with 800 life-size terracotta soldiers, as well as horses, chariots, etc., all put there to protect the emperor after death. These clay soldiers were supposed to, life-size clay soldiers were supposed to protect him after death. The burial part of the tomb was apparently a model of the great empire he ruled while alive. and it contained palaces and roads, heavenly bodies, and interestingly, it had rivers. But the rivers were flowing with, because water would evaporate, they were flowing with mercury, like mercury is in a liquid state, and it was kind of an eternal water, you might say. Ancient people thought of mercury as kind of almost a magical substance, but it's kind of interesting to ponder from a Buddhist point of view that this water, this mercury water with which he meant to sustain himself in his eternal world that he had created, is of course a deadly poison. So that's kind of a little bit of an irony right there. By the way, in order to ensure the stability and permanence of his unified China, like all dictators, Qin Shi Huang also tried to control the thoughts of his subjects by burning and banning books. But fortunately for him, but unfortunately for him, fortunately for others, neither his life nor his rule were eternal. China, named after himself and his kingdom, Qin, China, has remained more or less unified ever since. But his rule did not last long after his death. Because of all the cruelty he had practiced in his life, because he had created so much suffering with his ego, with his massive ego, his dynasty was soon overthrown, and his beautiful tomb, this eternal world he had built for himself, was smashed up and destroyed. And by the way, the weapons that all those terracotta soldiers were equipped with were used to help overthrow his dynasty. So that's also another irony there. But the emperor, throughout his life, he strove to attain his goals, really strove hard to attain his goals, and yet the consequences were certainly not what he expected. This should teach us that seeking self-benefit does not necessarily bring self-benefit. The first emperor of China is an extreme example of the way self-centeredness can manifest itself in a person's life. Still, Qin Shi Huang isn't such an unusual character. There have been lots of others like him since then, and probably more to come. If we consider the nature of his delusions, we might even see ourselves, our ordinary, everyday selves, mirrored in his selfish ways. When I think of my own attitudes, I can see that I too have spent a lot of time building up my own illusory world, the one in which I am at the center of everything. I know that my actions have harmed others and continue to do so. We human beings really have a hard time transcending our selfishness, but we should count ourselves lucky if we can manage to avoid the extremes of a person like Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Actually, come to think of it, given our tendency to seek self-benefit, most of us are very fortunate indeed not to find ourselves in a situation where we have the power and opportunity to develop those selfish qualities. So we can all be grateful that we are not kings or emperors, that we're not wealthy billionaires, that we have no power. That is also why, by the way, the spiritual path in all kinds of traditions throughout the world, throughout history, usually begins with some kind of renunciation of power, renunciation of wealth and so on, possessions and so on. Think of becoming a Buddhist monk and so on, or Christian monk. So there's a reason for that, you see. But there's something else we also need to understand. Buddhism teaches that no act, good or bad, comes out of nowhere. There are always causes and conditions which provide the opportunity and potential for our actions, and then our actions affect the conditions which provide the causes for more actions, and so on and so on. So even if we have really good intentions, these conditions might lead us to take actions which have negative, even evil consequences. It's quite possible that Qin Shi Huang actually had good intentions in what he was doing. He might have really wanted to benefit society. He might have believed that his self-image was quite correct and that his actions would provide great good for other people, or at least people in the abstract. He might have really intended good, but Buddhism allows us to understand that good intentions, or even bad intentions, really don't mean all that much. Seemingly good actions may quite likely have negative consequences. Evil actions may later result in good. We don't always know whether our intentions are good or bad anyway. As long as we are trapped in this cycle of birth and death, we cannot completely control what we do. We cannot judge the ultimate value, and we certainly cannot control the outcome. This is because we don't really know the ultimate causes of our good or bad actions. We believe our actions to be good, but that thought may be only another way of justifying what's really a self-centered intention. Self-centeredness really means that we can't see ourselves as changeable, impermanent beings. Believing ourselves impervious to the winds of change is really at the root of our dilemma, as the Buddha taught. Only when this false view is destroyed can we begin to awaken from the endless uncontrollable patterns that govern our lives. It doesn't really matter that much whether we are born kings or paupers. Whatever our condition, we are going to be faced with this reality of being foolish and deluded, self-centered beings. The great Buddhist teacher Shinran called himself a bombu, a foolish person of blind passions. Shakyamuni Buddha, as you know, was born a prince, a king, like Qin Shi Huang. But what a difference there is between those two. Shakyamuni was a king, or first a prince, who would have been the king, who questioned his ego, who questioned himself, his right to live a better life than his subjects. He refused to live well while others suffered. The moment Shakyamuni encountered the inequality at the root of his privileged position, as soon as he saw the suffering of others, he recognized that he too was ultimately subject to old age, sickness, and death, just like everybody else. And he began to question every assumption he had been taught to have about himself. Questioning these assumptions about himself was the beginning of the path of wisdom that allowed him to transcend the conditions, the karma, that determine the course of our lives. Thus, he was able to become the true benefactor of us all. The first emperor of China, on the other hand, just like most of us, held fast to the false ideas that he had been taught to believe about himself as divine and superior. He lived in an isolated dream world where he could believe himself to be the benevolent God bestowing gifts upon his subjects. But no matter how good his intentions may have been, the course of his actions were determined by the condition set up by his complete self-centeredness. Buddhism teaches us to become aware of our self-centeredness. When we uncover the selfishness hiding within us and realize the hidden motivations that are behind much of our thought and action in this current time that we are living in now, this realization has never been more important. When we see ourselves clearly, a deeper self, beyond conception, beyond our selfish minds, begins to manifest in our lives. This is what Shinran called Nembutsu, or Amida's vow, the innermost, deepest aspiration of infinite compassion, which is the root of all things, the source of all living. It is inconceivable, yet we discover ourselves within the embrace of this great compassion. At the same time, we realize we are part of the oneness of all life. This was also expressed by Shinran when he said, the Nembutsu alone is true and real. So to realize ourselves as one with the lives of all beings, not better, not separate, one with the lives of all beings, is what is true and essential. So thank you very much for listening, and please join me in Gassho as we recite the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.
May all beings be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May I be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to me. May I live in peace and harmony. May my family be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May my teachers be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May my friends be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May strangers be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May my enemies be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. May all beings be happy and well. May no harm or difficulties come to them. May they live in peace and harmony. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today for our Kahului Hongwanji YouTube Sunday service. I hope you enjoyed the service and were able to take away, or are able to take away something meaningful with you today. We just have a couple of announcements. We will be having our Hatsubon first year Bon memorial services for those who have passed away since the last Bon season. Those will be again as on Saturday, July 17th and Saturday, July 24th at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. But you have to be registered for those services. We can only accommodate a certain number of people in the temple for each service. And for the people who have had funerals through the temple, some kind of service through the temple that we have on record, that they have already been notified, but if anyone else is interested, do please call the temple office as soon as possible and we'll try to fit you into one of those services. Otherwise, we can do separate private services for you. The next in-person service after those, our next Sunday in-person service will be July 25th, which will be our Bon major service. So that's our one of our 6 major services. So we'll have that talk a little bit about the meaning of Obon and can remember all of our loved ones who have passed away over the years at this service. So we will have both the online service, the YouTube service like this, but also of the in-person service in the temple. So. Oh, and another announcement, a couple more things I announced last week as well. In Maui at the Cameron Center, there will be a blood bank drive July 20th through July 22nd. So call them, Cameron Center. Call them if you would like to make an appointment to donate blood. The phone number will be in the scrolling text at the end of the video. And then also Kahului Hongwanji BWA is participating in the Salvation Army school supply drive. And that will be from July 1st, already began, until July 16th. So if you would like to donate some school supplies to benefit children here on Maui, you can drop them off at the temple office. So once again, thank you for your participation in these important activities. Thank you. So thank you very much for joining us, and let's conclude our service now by reciting the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.